The afternoon sun filtered through my kitchen window in suburban Chicago, casting long shadows across the granite countertops. I was chopping vegetables for dinner, the rhythmic sound of the knife against the cutting board providing a mundane soundtrack to what I thought would be an ordinary Tuesday. My phone buzzed, Marcus calling. My pilot son never called during flight hours. Mom. His voice was barely a whisper, strained and breathless. Mom, you need to listen to me carefully. My hands froze mid-chop. Marcus? What's wrong? Are you okay? I'm fine, but... He paused, and I could hear the muffled sounds of an aircraft cabin in the background. She's here. Aunt Linda is on my flight. The knife slipped from my fingers, clattering against the counter. Linda. My sister. The sister I hadn't spoken to in 12 years. The sister who didn't know where Marcus worked, what he looked like now, or that he'd followed his father's footsteps into aviation. That's impossible, I breathed. She doesn't even know you're a pilot. She doesn't know anything about. Mom. She recognized me. His voice cracked with emotion. She was boarding, saw my name tag, and just stopped, right there in the jetway. She stared at me like she'd seen a ghost. I gripped the counter, my knuckles white. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, the walls closing in. 12 years of carefully maintained distance, of avoiding family gatherings, of keeping Marcus away from that side of the family, all of it unraveling because of a random flight assignment. What did you say to her? I managed to ask. Nothing yet. I'm in the cockpit.
But Mom.
He paused again, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight I'd never heard before. She's crying. Just sitting there in 12C, crying and staring at her hands. The flight attendants are worried about her. My mind raced back to that terrible day 12 years ago. The funeral, the accusations, the things Linda had screamed at me across our father's grave. Words that could never be taken back. Blame that had severed our bond irreparably. Or so I'd thought. How long until you land? I asked, already knowing the answer would upend my evening. 2 hours and 40 minutes. We're flying from Denver to Chicago O'Hare. Chicago. She was coming here. To my city. After all these years of maintaining separate coasts, separate lives, she was flying directly into my territory. If you're invested in this story and want to see how it unfolds, click that subscribe button right now. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything to this channel. ***. Marcus. I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. You don't have to talk to her if you don't want to. You can just do your job and leave. I know, he replied. But Mom, you didn't see her face. She looked broken. Like seeing me broke something open inside her. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. This was exactly what I'd tried to prevent for over a decade. The pain. The reopening of wounds. The inevitable confrontation that could only end in more heartbreak. Your father would know what to do, I whispered. Dad isn't here, Marcus said gently. But I am. And so is she. And I think maybe it's time we stop running. The line went quiet except for the steady hum of the aircraft engines. In that silence, I heard the echo of all the years we'd spent avoiding this moment. Holidays celebrated separately, family photos with conspicuous absences, stories told to Marcus about an aunt who existed only in carefully edited memories. Call me when you land, I finally said. Don't do anything until you call me. I promise. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. The line went dead, and I stood there in my kitchen, surrounded by half-prepared dinner ingredients, feeling the foundation of my carefully constructed life beginning to crack. Linda was on Marcus's flight. Linda, who blamed me for our father's death. Linda, who'd sworn never to forgive me. Linda, who was about to land in Chicago in less than 3 hours. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts, past dozens of names, until I found the one I'd never deleted despite having no reason to keep it. Linda, sister, do not call. My finger hovered over the number. Should I warn her? Should I call and explain? But explain what exactly? That I'd hidden her nephew from her for 12 years? That I'd chosen to sever all ties rather than face the pain of reconciliation? The doorbell rang, jarring me from my paralysis. I wasn't expecting anyone. With shaking hands, I walked to the front door and peered through the peephole. It was my neighbor, Patricia, holding what looked like a casserole dish. I considered not answering, but she'd already seen my car in the driveway. I opened the door, forcing a smile. "Hi, Patricia, what's—" "I made too much lasagna," she interrupted cheerfully, completely oblivious to my distress. "Thought you might want some. You look pale, honey. Are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine, just got some unexpected news." Patricia's expression shifted to concern. "Bad news? Is Marcus okay? I saw on Facebook he was flying today." The casual mention of Facebook made my blood run cold. Of course. In the age of social media, secrets were harder to keep. Had Linda found him there? Had she been searching? Or was this truly just a cosmic accident? "He's fine," I assured her, taking the lasagna. "Thank you for this. I should get back to—" "You know," Patricia said, not taking the hint to leave, "I always thought it was sad that Marcus doesn't know his aunt. My sister and I are so close, I can't imagine going years without talking." "What was it that came between you two?" I stared at her, this well-meaning neighbor who had no idea she was poking at the most painful wound of my life. "It's complicated," I said simply. "Everything's complicated until someone decides to uncomplicate it," Patricia replied with a kind of simplistic wisdom that made me want to scream. "Life's too short, honey. Trust me on that." After she finally left, I returned to my kitchen and did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out the old photo albums from the back of the hallway closet. Dust covered the leather bindings as I carried them to the dining table. My hands trembled as I opened the first one. There we were, Linda and me as children, gap-toothed and grinning at the camera. Linda pushing me on a swing set, me helping her with homework at the kitchen table. The two of us at our high school graduations, arms around each other. Linda at my wedding, beautiful in her bridesmaid dress, tears of joy streaming down her face. And then Dad. Page after page of our father, at family barbecues, holiday dinners, Marcus's baby photos. Dad holding infant Marcus, his face radiating pure joy. That was 2 years before the diagnosis. Before everything fell apart. The last photo in the album was from the hospital. Dad in his bed, frail and weak, barely recognizable. Linda on one side, me on the other. Both of us forcing smiles for a camera neither of us wanted pointed at us. That was 3 weeks before he died. 3 weeks before Linda and I would stand on opposite sides of his grave, hurling accusations and blame like weapons meant to wound. "You killed him," she'd screamed, her face contorted with grief and rage. "You and your selfish choices killed him." My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Asterisk still processing this. Flight attendant said Aunt Linda hasn't moved or spoken since boarding. Should I try to talk to her? Asterisk. I typed back. Asterisk wait until after landing. Stay professional. I'm here when you need me. Asterisk. But even as I sent it, I knew I was being a coward. I was telling my son to delay the inevitable instead of facing it head-on. Just like I'd been delaying for 12 years. This story is just beginning to unfold, and if you want to find out what happens when Marcus and Linda finally talk, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Hit that red subscribe button and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Your click makes a real difference. Asterisk, asterisk. Another memory surfaced, unbidden and unwelcome. Dad's voice, weak but insistent, during one of our last conversations alone. "Promise me you'll take care of your sister. Promise me you won't let this break you two apart." "I promise, Dad," I'd said, squeezing his hand. I'd broken that promise before his body was even cold. The afternoon sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. In 2 hours, Marcus's flight would land at O'Hare. In 2 hours, my sister would step off that plane into a city she'd avoided for over a decade. In 2 hours, the secret I'd been keeping, not just from Linda, but from myself, would finally come to light. And that secret wasn't just about hiding Marcus from his aunt. It was about the real reason Linda and I had stopped speaking. The real reason she blamed me for Dad's death. The truth I'd buried so deep that sometimes I almost convinced myself it wasn't real. But it was real. And it was about to surface at 30,000 feet, in a pressurized cabin, with my son caught in the middle. I picked up my phone and did something I'd sworn I'd never do. I opened Facebook and typed in Linda's name. Her profile appeared. Public, surprisingly. Photos of her life on the West Coast, her successful career as an architect, her beautiful home in Seattle. But no photos of family. No mentions of sisters or nephews. Just a carefully curated life that looked perfect from the outside. The most recent post was from this morning. Sometimes life takes you exactly where you need to be, even when it's the last place you want to go. Flying back to Chicago today for the first time in years. Scared but ready. My heart stopped. This wasn't random. She'd chosen this flight. She'd chosen to come back to Chicago. But had she known Marcus would be her pilot? Or was that truly just the universe's cruel sense of timing? I needed to talk to someone. I needed advice. But who? I'd spent 12 years isolating myself from anyone who knew both Linda and me. I'd moved to a different suburb, made new friends who knew nothing about my estranged sister, created a life where I never had to explain the gaping hole in our family tree.
My phone rang.
Marcus again. Mom, we're beginning our descent. I need to know. Do I tell her you know she's on this flight? Do I give her your number? What do I do? Marcus, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. First, land the plane safely. That's your job. Everything else can wait. But everything else can wait, I repeated firmly. We've waited 12 years. Another hour won't matter. But I was wrong. Every minute mattered now. Because Linda wasn't just coming to Chicago. According to her Facebook post, she was coming for a reason. And I had a terrible feeling that reason was me. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the sky darken. Somewhere up there, my son was flying a plane carrying my sister. Two people I loved more than life itself, brought together by fate or coincidence or something I couldn't name. And here I was on the ground, helpless to control what happened next. The house felt empty suddenly, too quiet, too still. My husband Richard wouldn't be home from his law firm for another 2 hours. I was alone with my thoughts, my memories, and my mounting dread. A memory flashed. Linda and me, teenagers, lying on our backs in the backyard, staring at airplanes crossing the sky. When I grow up, Linda had said, I'm going to build buildings so tall they touch the clouds. And I'd replied, when I grow up, I'm going to fly planes through those clouds. Neither of us had become pilots.
But my son had.
And now he was literally flying Linda through those clouds we'd once dreamed about together. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, this is Linda. I'm on Marcus's flight. We need to talk. I'm staying at the Marriott downtown. Room 847. Please, asterisk. My hands shook so violently, I nearly dropped the phone. She had my number. After 12 years of silence, she had my number, and was using it. And she'd said please, a word I never thought I'd hear from her again. I stared at the message, my mind racing through a dozen responses. But what could I possibly say in a text message that would encompass 12 years of pain, regret, and loss? Instead, I typed, I'll be there. The moment I hit send, I knew there was no going back. The wall I'd built between us was crumbling, and I was going to have to face what was on the other side, whether I was ready or not. Marcus steadied his hands on the yoke, his eyes fixed on the instrument panel in front of him. The Boeing 737 hummed around him, a familiar comfort that now felt like a cage. Captain Reynolds sat beside him in the left seat, oblivious to the personal crisis unfolding in his co-pilot's mind. Everything okay over there, Thompson? Reynolds asked, glancing at Marcus with the casual concern of a veteran pilot who'd seen countless young first officers work through their nerves. Yes, sir, Marcus replied automatically, his voice steadier than his heartbeat. Just reviewing our descent checklist. It was a lie. He wasn't reviewing anything. His mind was 30 rows back in seat 12C, where his aunt, a woman he'd been raised to believe was basically a stranger, sat staring out the window with tears streaming down her face. The flight attendant call button chimed. Marcus watched on the cabin display as Sarah, the lead flight attendant, made her way down the aisle. She paused at row 12, leaning down to speak with someone. Linda. It had to be Linda. Marcus's finger hovered over the intercom button. He could call back, ask Sarah what was happening, but that would raise questions from Reynolds. Better to stay professional. Better to pretend this was just another flight from Denver to Chicago, just another 200 passengers he'd never see again after landing. Except he would see her again. Because despite 12 years of carefully maintained distance, despite his mother's unspoken rules about that side of the family, Linda was blood. And blood, as his father used to say before the accident that took his life 7 years ago, always finds a way back. United 447, descend and maintain flight level 250. The air traffic controller's voice crackled through the headset. Descend and maintain flight level 250, United 447, Reynolds responded, already making the adjustment. They were getting closer. 45 minutes to landing. 45 minutes until Marcus would have to decide whether to stay in the cockpit until all passengers deplaned, the coward's way out, or to stand at the door with the crew and say goodbye to each passenger, including the aunt who'd just seen him for the first time since he was 9 years old. Another chime. Sarah appeared on the flight deck intercom. Cockpit, this is Sarah. Reynolds pressed the button. Go ahead. We have a passenger in 12C who's experiencing some distress. She's not ill or disruptive, but I wanted to check if she requested any special assistance or if there's something we should know. Marcus's throat tightened. He kept his eyes on the instruments, willing himself to stay silent. Negative, Reynolds replied. No special assistance requested. Is she okay? Does she need medical attention? She says she's fine, just emotional. Personal reasons. She did ask. Sarah hesitated. She asked if First Officer Thompson was related to Thomas Thompson. Said something about recognizing the name. The cockpit fell silent except for the steady hum of the engines. Marcus felt Reynolds's eyes on him, questioning. That's my father's name, Marcus admitted quietly.
Was.
He passed away 7 years ago. Reynolds's expression softened. Is she family? My aunt. My mother's sister. I haven't seen her since I was a kid. Jesus, kid. That's. Reynolds shook his head. That's a hell of a coincidence. Yeah. Marcus's hands gripped the yoke tighter. A hell of a coincidence. You want to talk to her? I can handle things up here if you need a minute. Marcus considered it. His first instinct was to say no, to hide behind procedure and professionalism. But another part of him, the part that still remembered Aunt Linda's laugh, the way she used to sneak him cookies before dinner, the warmth of her hugs, that part wanted answers. Maybe after we land, Marcus said finally. I need to keep my head clear for the approach. Before we continue with what happens next, I want to ask for your support. If you're enjoying this story and want to see how Marcus handles this impossible situation, please take a second to hit that subscribe button. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, and every single one of you matters to us. Asterisk, asterisk. Reynolds nodded approvingly. Good call. Stay focused. Family drama can wait until the plane's safely on the ground. But as they continued their descent, Marcus couldn't shake the image of Linda's face when she'd seen his name tag. The recognition, the shock, the way her hand had flown to her mouth as if to stop a scream. She'd aged. Of course she had, but he'd recognized her instantly from the few photos his mother had kept hidden in a box in the attic. Photos he wasn't supposed to know about, but had found anyway when he was 13, searching for Christmas presents. The intercom chimed again. Sarah's voice was more urgent this time. Cockpit, she's asking if she can speak to Marcus. She said she needs to apologize for something. Reynolds looked at Marcus with raised eyebrows. Your call, kid. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. An apology. For what? For missing his childhood? For whatever had torn his mother and Anne apart? For not being there when his father died? Tell her I'll talk to her at the gate, Marcus said into the intercom. After landing. Copy that, Sarah replied, and the line clicked off. There's a story there, Reynolds observed, adjusting their altitude as they entered Chicago's airspace. There's always a story, Marcus said quietly. His mind drifted back to the fragments he'd pieced together over the years. His mother never talked about Linda directly, but he'd learned things from overheard conversations, from the way his mom would sometimes stare at her phone with a pained expression before putting it away. He knew there'd been a fight at his grandfather's funeral. He knew Linda had moved to Seattle shortly after. He knew his mother cried sometimes on Linda's birthday and pretended she wasn't.
What he didn't know was why.
What could have been so terrible that two sisters who'd once been inseparable couldn't even speak for over a decade? United 447, contact Chicago approach on 124.35, ATC instructed. 124.35, United 447, Reynolds confirmed, switching frequencies. They were 20 minutes out now. The Chicago skyline was beginning to take shape through the evening haze, a familiar sight that usually brought Marcus comfort. Tonight it looked ominous, full of unknown confrontations and uncomfortable truths. His phone buzzed in his flight bag, probably his mother, checking in. He couldn't answer it now, but he knew what she'd be asking. Did you talk to her? What did she say? What are you going to do? He didn't have answers. Not yet. The runway lights of O'Hare appeared in the distance, a string of white pearls guiding them home. Marcus ran through the landing checklist mechanically, his body operating on trained instinct while his mind remained stubbornly 30 rows back. Gear down, Reynolds commanded. Gear down 3 green, Marcus confirmed, feeling the satisfying thunk of the landing gear locking into place. They were on final approach now. 5 minutes to touchdown. 5 minutes until he'd have to make a decision that would either maintain the careful distance his family had preserved for 12 years or shatter it entirely. The runway rushed up to meet them. Reynolds flared perfectly, and the main wheels kissed the pavement with barely a bump. Thrust reversers deployed with their characteristic roar. They were home. Nice landing, Captain, Marcus said, following the required call-outs. Thanks. Now comes the hard part for you, though, doesn't it? Marcus nodded silently as they taxied toward Gate B-17. Through the cockpit windows, he could see the gate agent preparing the jetway, ground crew members positioning equipment. Normal airport operations. Nothing normal about what was waiting for him in the cabin. They parked and Reynolds began the shutdown checklist. Marcus moved through his duties automatically, his mind elsewhere. He could hear the passenger announcement, the flight attendants preparing for deplaning, the shuffle of people gathering their belongings. And somewhere in that chaos, Linda was standing up, smoothing her clothes, preparing to face the nephew she hadn't seen in 12 years. Go ahead, Reynolds said, completing the last checklist item. I'll finish up here. Go talk to your aunt. Thank you, sir. Marcus unbuckled and stood, his legs unsteady. At 6 feet tall and 190 pounds, he never felt smaller than he did walking toward that cockpit door. Sarah was at her station by the exit, saying goodbye to deplaning passengers with her practiced smile. When she saw Marcus emerge from the cockpit, her expression shifted to one of sympathy. She's still in her seat, Sarah whispered, waiting for everyone else to leave. Marcus nodded, positioning himself by the door to bid goodbye to passengers. Each "thank you for flying with us" felt hollow, automatic. His eyes kept drifting back to row 12, where he could just make out the top of Linda's head, still seated, patient. The stream of passengers finally trickled to an end. The last businessman rushed past with a curt nod. Then silence. Marcus took a deep breath and walked down the now empty aisle. Each row felt like a mile. Linda's back was to him, her posture rigid with tension. As his shadow fell across her seat, she turned. Up close, the years were more evident. She was 47 now, his mother was 49, but she looked older than that.
Tired. Careworn.
Her eyes, the same shade of green as his mother's, were red from crying. Hi, Marcus said, immediately feeling stupid. What do you say to an aunt who's basically a stranger? Marcus. Linda's voice cracked on his name. You look just like your father. Just exactly like him. They stood there in awkward silence, the airplane creaking and settling around them. Somewhere outside, another jet was pulling up to a neighboring gate. Life continued, oblivious to the personal drama unfolding in this empty cabin. Your mom she must be so proud of you, Linda said, wiping at her eyes. A pilot, like your dad. She is. Marcus shifted his weight, unsure whether to sit or keep standing. Did you know I'd be flying this route? Linda shook her head quickly.
No.
God, no. This is the worst possible coincidence. Or the best. I don't know anymore. She laughed, but it was bitter, painful to hear. I came to Chicago to find your mom.
To apologize.
To try to fix what I broke. And instead, I find you. What did you break? The question came out before Marcus could stop it. Linda's face crumpled. Everything. I broke everything. She stood abruptly, gathering her purse. I shouldn't have said anything. I should have just let you do your job, and… My mom texted you, didn't she? Marcus interrupted. That's how you got her number.
No.
Linda pulled out her phone, showing him a message. I've had her number for 5 years. I never had the courage to use it until today. The message on screen was from his mother. I'll be there, simple.
Direct.
And it changed everything. She's meeting you? Marcus asked. At my hotel. Tonight. Linda's hands shook as she put her phone away. After 12 years of silence, she said she'd come. And I'm terrified, Marcus. Absolutely terrified. Behind them, Sarah cleared her throat gently. I'm sorry, but we need to prepare the cabin for the next flight. Marcus looked at his aunt, really looked at her. He saw the fear, the regret, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, some things could be fixed. And he made a decision that would have made his mother either very proud or very angry. Let me drive you to your hotel, he said. We can talk on the way. We're at a crucial turning point in this story. If you're as invested as I am in seeing where this goes, please subscribe to the channel now. Your subscription helps us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers, and it means the world to us. Asterisk, asterisk. Linda's eyes widened. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. But I want to. There's a lot I don't understand about what happened between you and Mom. Maybe you can help me understand. Marcus, there are things you might not want to know. I'm 27 years old, Marcus said firmly. I think I can handle it. They walked off the plane together, Linda following him through the jetway into the terminal. O'Hare was its usual chaos, announcements blaring, people rushing, children crying. Marcus led her through the crowd with practiced ease, using his airline ID to access crew-only corridors that offered a faster route. How long have you been flying? Linda asked as they walked. 5 years. Got my commercial license when I was 22. Dad always wanted me to fly, so after he died… Marcus trailed off, the old pain still sharp. I should have been there, Linda said quietly. At the funeral, I should have put aside my anger and been there for you. Why weren't you? They'd reached the employee parking garage. Marcus's Honda Civic was in its usual spot, dusty from days of sitting unused between flights. He unlocked it, and they both got in, the confined space making the conversation suddenly more intimate, more unavoidable. Before I answer that, Linda said, buckling her seatbelt, you need to understand that what happened between your mom and me, it wasn't simple. It wasn't one person's fault. We both made mistakes. We both said things we can't take back. Marcus started the engine, pulling out of the parking space. I've spent 12 years wondering what could possibly be worth losing your sister over. Worth losing me over. That hit Linda like a physical blow. He could see it in the way she flinched, the way her hands twisted in her lap. You're right. Nothing should have been worth that. But we were both so consumed by grief, by anger, by guilt. Guilt about what? About your grandfather. About how he died. Marcus merged onto I-90, heading toward downtown Chicago. The evening traffic was heavy, but moving. City lights were beginning to glow against the darkening sky. Somewhere in this vast urban sprawl, his mother was preparing for a confrontation she'd avoided for over a decade. I know Grandpa had cancer, Marcus said. Mom told me that much.
He did.
Pancreatic cancer. Terminal. He had maybe 6 months, the doctor said. Linda stared out the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. But he didn't die from the cancer, Marcus. He died from the treatment. From a decision your mom made that I disagreed with that killed him 3 months earlier than it should have. The traffic around them blurred. Marcus's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. What decision? She convinced him to try an experimental treatment. It was risky, expensive, and had less than a 5% success rate. I wanted him to focus on quality of life, on hospice care, on spending his last months in peace. But your mom. Linda's voice broke. She couldn't accept that he was dying. She had to try to save him. And the treatment destroyed what little time he had left. They drove in silence for several minutes. Marcus processed this information, understanding clicking into place. This was the secret. This was the wound that had never healed. And at the funeral, Linda continued, her voice barely audible over the car's engine, I blamed her. I said terrible things. I told her she'd killed him with her refusal to let go. I told her she was selfish and that Dad died suffering because of her. Tears streamed freely down her face now. And then your mom told me the real reason she'd pushed for the experimental treatment. What reason? Linda turned to look at him directly. She was pregnant, with a baby girl, your sister. And she was terrified of raising a newborn without Dad's help, without his support. So she gambled with his last months, hoping to give him more time. Hoping he'd live long enough to meet his granddaughter. Marcus's foot eased off the gas involuntarily. A sister. He'd had a sister. Had, he asked, dreading the answer. Linda nodded, fresh tears falling. Your mom miscarried 2 weeks after the funeral. The stress, the grief, the guilt, she lost the baby. And she never told me. She lived with that loss alone, because I'd cut her out of my life. By the time I found out, years later through a mutual friend, it was too late to fix it. Too many years, too much pain. The exit for downtown Chicago appeared. Marcus took it automatically, his mind reeling. He'd almost had a sister. His mother had almost had a daughter. And she'd lost both her father and her unborn child within weeks of each other, all while her sister blamed her for being selfish. Does she know you know? Marcus asked.
No.
I never had the courage to call her, to write to her, to tell her I was sorry. Until today. Linda wiped her face with shaking hands. Today I finally decided that 12 years was long enough. That I needed to face her, to beg her forgiveness, even if she couldn't give it. They pulled up to the Marriott downtown. The hotel's rotating doors spun with arriving and departing guests. The valet approached, but Marcus waved him off, parking in a nearby loading zone instead. My mom will be here soon, Marcus said. Are you ready for this? No, Linda admitted. But I don't think I'll ever be ready. Some things you just have to do scared. They sat in the car, this aunt and nephew, who were virtually strangers, bound by blood and a shared family tragedy. Marcus thought about his mother, driving through this same city right now, probably terrified, probably rehearsing what she'd say. He thought about his grandfather, who died wanting his daughters to stay close. He thought about his father, who'd always said family was everything. And he thought about the sister he never knew, the one who would have been 11 years old now if she'd lived. Aunt Linda, he said finally, whatever happens tonight, I want you to know something. I don't blame you for staying away. I don't know if I would have handled things any better. But I'm glad you came back. I'm glad I got to meet you again. Linda reached over and squeezed his hand. Your father would be so proud of the man you've become. I hope so. They got out of the car, and Marcus walked Linda through the lobby to the elevators. He pressed the button for the 8th floor, and they rode up in silence. When the doors opened, Linda hesitated. You don't have to come with me, she said. I know. But I want to be there. For both of you. They walked down the corridor to room 847. Linda pulled out her key card, then paused with her hand on the door handle. What if she can't forgive me? She whispered. Then at least you tried, Marcus replied. At least you stopped running. Linda nodded and opened the door. I arrived at the Marriott downtown with my hands still trembling on the steering wheel. The parking garage was full of sleek rental cars and luxury sedans, a stark contrast to my modest SUV with its faded bumper stickers and child seat anchors that hadn't been removed in 11 years, remnants of Marcus's childhood that I couldn't bring myself to take out. Room 847. I'd memorized the number from Linda's text, repeated it to myself during the entire 40-minute drive from my suburban home. Room 847, where 12 years of silence would finally end, one way or another. The elevator ride-up felt eternal. I watched the numbers climb 3, 4, 5, and with each floor, my heart rate increased. What would I say? Where would I even begin? I'd played out 1,000 scenarios in my mind, practiced 1,000 opening lines, but now that the moment was here, every word felt inadequate. The hallway on the 8th floor was deserted, carpeted in that generic hotel pattern design to hide stains and age. Room 847 was at the end, and as I approached, I heard voices inside. Male and female. Marcus and Linda were already there, together, talking. I'd been excluded from my own confrontation. The thought was bitter and irrational, but I couldn't help it. They were in there, my son and my sister, building a bridge I'd spent 12 years ensuring couldn't be built. Part of me wanted to turn around, go home, let them have their reconciliation without me complicating things. But I'd promised I'd come. And unlike 12 years ago, I was going to keep my promise. I knocked. 3 firm raps that echoed down the empty hallway. The voices inside stopped. Footsteps approached. The door opened. Marcus stood there, still in his pilot's uniform, his face a mixture of relief and apprehension.
Mom.
Thank God. Come in. I stepped inside, and there she was. Linda sat on the edge of the hotel bed, her posture rigid with tension. She'd changed from her travel clothes into jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger, more like the sister I remembered. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stared at each other across the neutral territory of this anonymous hotel room. Hi, Claire, Linda said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Hi, Linda. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I was hyper-aware of Marcus standing between us, a living reminder of all the years we'd missed, all the moments we'd never get back. I'll leave you two to talk, Marcus said, moving toward the door.
No.
The word came out simultaneously from both Linda and me, our voices overlapping in a harmony that reminded me of when we were girls, finishing each other's sentences. Marcus stopped, looking uncertain. Are you sure? This seems like something you should do privately. You're part of this family, I said firmly, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Whatever we say, you have a right to hear it. No more secrets. Linda nodded in agreement. He already knows. I told him everything in the car. My eyes snapped to her. Everything.
About Dad.
About the experimental treatment. About. Her voice caught. About the baby. The air left my lungs. The baby. The daughter I'd carried for 4 months. The little girl I'd named Emma in my heart. The child who never got to take a single breath. I'd never spoken about her to anyone except Richard, had buried that grief so deep I sometimes forgot it was there. But it was always there. A phantom weight, a ghost presence in every family photo, every birthday celebration, every Christmas morning. If you're feeling the weight of this moment like I am, I need to ask you to do something. Please subscribe to this channel. We're building a community here, working toward 1,000 subscribers, and your support makes these stories possible. Click that subscribe button right now. Asterisk, asterisk. You knew? I asked Marcus, my voice small. All this time, you knew you almost had a sister? No, Mom. Marcus came to stand beside me, his hand finding my shoulder. I just found out 20 minutes ago. Aunt Linda told me. I turned to Linda, anger flaring hot and quick. You had no right. That wasn't your story to tell. You're right, Linda said, standing up to face me directly. I had no right. Just like I had no right to blame you for Dad's death. Just like I had no right to abandon you when you needed me most. I've had no rights for 12 years because I gave them all up when I walked away from you. The anger deflated as quickly as it had risen, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. I moved to the desk chair and sat heavily. Why did you come back? After all this time, why now? Linda sat back down on the bed, her hands twisting in her lap. Because I'm dying, Claire. The room tilted. Marcus's hand tightened on my shoulder. What? Not immediately, Linda said quickly. I'm not terminal, but I have multiple sclerosis. Early stages, but it's progressive. My neurologist says I have maybe 10 good years left before I'll need serious help. She laughed, but it was hollow. I'm 47 years old, and I'm already planning for the day when I can't walk, can't work, can't live independently. And all I could think about was dying alone, without having made things right with the only family I have left. I stared at her, processing this new information. MS progressive. 10 years. All the anger I'd been holding on to suddenly felt petty and pointless in the face of that diagnosis. When did you find out? I asked. 6 months ago. The symptoms started last year. Numbness in my hands, balance problems, fatigue. I thought it was stress, working too hard. Linda's voice cracked. But then I started dropping things, stumbling for no reason. The MRI showed lesions on my brain and spine. Classic MS. Marcus moved to sit beside Linda on the bed. Does anyone else know? My doctors. My boss. I had to tell her in case I need accommodations. And now you too. Linda wiped at her eyes. I don't have anyone else. I've spent 12 years building a successful career, a beautiful life, and I did it all alone because I was too proud and too stubborn to admit I was wrong. You weren't wrong about everything, I said quietly. All three of them looked at me in surprise. You were right that I couldn't accept Dad was dying. You were right that I pushed him toward a treatment that destroyed his quality of life. You were right that I was selfish. Claire. No, let me finish. I stood up, needing to move, to pace. The hotel room was small, but I walked to the window and stared out at the Chicago skyline. I was 8 weeks pregnant when Dad got his diagnosis. I hadn't told anyone yet, not even Richard. I was waiting until the second trimester, until it felt safe. I turned back to face them. And when the doctors said he had 6 months, all I could think about was that he'd never meet her. That my daughter would grow up without knowing her grandfather. So you convinced him to try the experimental treatment, Linda said softly. I begged him. I researched it obsessively, found every success story I could, made it seem like a real chance when I knew, deep down, that it was a long shot at best. The words poured out now, a confession I'd been holding for over a decade. And Dad, being Dad, said yes because he wanted to try for me. For his grandchild. Not for himself, he was ready to go. But for me. Marcus had tears streaming down his face now. Mom, that doesn't make you selfish. That makes you human. It makes me a coward, I corrected. Because when the treatment failed, when Dad spent his last 3 months in agony instead of at peace, I couldn't face it. And when you confronted me at the funeral, Linda, when you said I'd killed him with my selfishness, I couldn't even defend myself because I knew you were right. I wasn't right, Linda said firmly. I was angry and grieving and looking for someone to blame. But Claire, Dad made his own choice. You didn't force him. You gave him information and he decided to try. That was his decision. And then I miscarried, and I convinced myself it was punishment. That I'd sacrifice Dad for a baby that was never meant to be born anyway. I was crying now. Ugly, wrenching sobs that I'd suppressed for 12 years. And I couldn't tell you because you were already gone and I couldn't face your judgment on top of everything else. Linda crossed the room and pulled me into a fierce embrace. I stiffened at first. 12 years was a long time to go without physical contact from someone, but then I melted into it, into the familiar scent of her perfume, the feel of her arms around me, the sister I'd missed every single day, even when I pretended I hadn't. I'm so sorry, Linda whispered into my hair. I'm so sorry. You lost Dad and Emma within 2 weeks, and instead of being there for you, I made it worse. I blamed you when you were already blaming yourself. I lost you too, I managed between sobs. I lost my whole family in 1 month. We stood there, holding each other, crying together for the first time in over a decade. Marcus joined us, wrapping his arms around both of us, and for a moment we were just family, messy and broken and trying to heal. When we finally pulled apart, we were all tear-stained and exhausted. Linda gestured to the hotel room's small seating area, a couch and 2 chairs arranged around a coffee table. We sat, and for the first time in 12 years, we talked. Really talked. Tell me about her, Linda said. About Emma. I took a shaky breath. I only had her for 4 months, but I knew her. I knew she'd be stubborn like you, and creative like me. I knew she'd have Richard's dimples and my green eyes. I knew she'd drive Marcus crazy, and he'd be the best big brother in the world. I looked at my son. You were so excited when we told you. You wanted to teach her everything. How to ride a bike, how to catch fireflies, how to build a fort out of couch cushions. I remember, Marcus said quietly. I remember being confused when we didn't talk about her anymore after the funeral. I couldn't, I admitted. Every time I tried to say her name, it felt like losing her all over again. But you named her, Linda said. That's important. She had a name. She was real. She was real, I echoed. And for a long time, I wished I'd gone with her. That the miscarriage had taken me too. Mom. Marcus's voice was sharp with pain. I'm sorry, sweetheart. But you need to know, there were dark days. Days when I couldn't see the point of continuing. If it wasn't for you and your father, I don't know if I would have. I reached over and squeezed his hand. You saved me. You gave me a reason to keep going. Linda was crying again. And I should have been there. I should have helped carry that weight instead of adding to it. We both made mistakes, I said. We both said and did things we regret. But Linda, you're here now. That's what matters. Is it enough? Linda asked. Can 12 years of silence be forgiven? I thought about that question, about all the birthdays and holidays we'd spent apart, all the milestones unmarked, all the support not given. I thought about the anger I'd nurtured, using it as a shield against the grief underneath. And I thought about Linda's diagnosis, about the finite time we all had, about the years we'd already wasted. I don't know if I can forgive 12 years, I said honestly. But I think I can forgive today. And then tomorrow, I can forgive that day. And we can take it one day at a time until forgiveness doesn't feel like work anymore. This is such a crucial moment in their journey toward healing. If you're invested in seeing how this family rebuilds what was broken, please help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Your subscription means we can keep bringing you these meaningful stories. ***. Linda nodded slowly. One day at a time. I can do that. And I want to know about your life, I added. About your MS, about your work, about everything I've missed. No more hiding. No more secrets. No more secrets, Linda agreed. Marcus cleared his throat. I have a question. For both of you. We turned to him, and he looked suddenly young despite his pilot's uniform and adult confidence. Growing up, I always felt like there was this huge gap in our family. Like a piece was missing. And now I know why. It wasn't just Emma. It was Aunt Linda too. All the stories about her stopped when I was 9. All the photos of her got packed away. It was like she died, but nobody told me. I flinched at that. He was right. I'd erased Linda from our lives so thoroughly that Marcus had grown up with a ghost for an aunt. I'm sorry, I said. You deserve to know your aunt. You deserve to have more family. I still do, Marcus said pointedly. If you two can figure this out, I get my aunt back. And maybe we can stop pretending we're fine with this tiny broken family. We're not broken, Linda said firmly. We're healing. There's a difference. Then prove it, Marcus challenged. Both of you. Don't just talk about forgiving each other. Actually do the work. See a therapist together. Visit each other. Be in each other's lives. I looked at Linda, who was looking back at me with the same mixture of hope and fear I felt. It would be so easy to slip back into old patterns, to let distance and time create more separation. But Marcus was right. We owed it to each other, to him, to Dad's memory, to make this work. I'm willing if you are, I said to Linda. I'm willing, she confirmed. Though I should warn you, with the MS, I might be a lot of work in the coming years. Good, I said. You can make up for the 12 years when you weren't any work at all. Linda laughed, a real genuine laugh that transformed her face. Fair enough. We spent the next 3 hours in that hotel room, talking about everything we'd missed. Linda told us about her career as an architect, about the award-winning buildings she designed, about her beautiful but lonely life in Seattle. I told her about Marcus's achievements, about Richard's success at his law firm, about the community theater productions I'd gotten involved with. We looked at photos on our phones, catching up on years of living. At one point, Linda showed us pictures of her latest project, a pediatric hospital in Portland with walls of windows designed to bring in natural light. It's for the kids, she explained. Studies show natural light helps healing. So I designed the whole building to maximize sunlight in patient rooms. She paused, her finger hovering over another photo. I named one of the gardens Emma's Garden. There's a small plaque, in memory of Emma Thompson, who never got to see the light. I hope that's okay. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears streaming down my face again. All these years, Linda had been carrying Emma's memory too. All these years, I'd thought I was alone in my grief, but Linda had been grieving in her own way, building monuments to the niece she'd never met. That's beautiful, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. Can we visit it someday? Of course, Linda said. You're both welcome in Seattle anytime. And you're welcome in Chicago, I added. In fact, why don't you stay for a while? Don't rush back to Seattle. Stay, and let us get to know you again. Linda hesitated. I have work, which can be done remotely for a few days, right? Marcus interjected. Come on, Aunt Linda. When's the last time you took a vacation? I don't remember, Linda admitted. Then it settled. I said with more confidence than I felt. You'll stay with us. We have a guest room that never gets used. Stay for a week, 2 weeks, however long you want. Are you sure? Linda asked, searching my face. That's a big step from one day at a time. I'm sure, I said. And surprisingly, I meant it. The idea of Linda in my house, sharing meals, having coffee in the morning, felt right in a way I hadn't expected. We made plans then. Linda would check out at the hotel tomorrow morning and come home with me. Marcus would come over for dinner when he wasn't flying. We'd visit Emma's grave together, something I hadn't been able to do in years. We'd look through old photo albums, tell stories about Dad, remember the good times before everything fell apart. It was past midnight when we finally left the hotel room. The three of us rode the elevator down together, standing in comfortable silence. In the lobby, Marcus hugged us both goodbye before heading to his car. I love you, Mom. I love you, Aunt Linda. And I'm really glad we're doing this. We love you too, sweetheart, I said. After he left, Linda and I stood in the hotel lobby, two middle-aged women who'd once been inseparable sisters, who'd let grief tear them apart, and who were now tentatively finding their way back to each other. Thank you for coming tonight, Linda said. I wasn't sure you would. Thank you for coming back to Chicago, I replied. I wasn't sure I'd ever see you again. We've wasted so much time. Then let's not waste any more. I hugged her goodnight, and this time it felt less desperate, more hopeful. Tomorrow, we'd start the real work of rebuilding. Tonight, it was enough to know we were both willing to try. As I drove home through the empty Chicago streets, I thought about Dad and what he'd say if he could see us now. He'd probably laugh at how stubborn we'd both been, how we'd inherited his infamous Thompson pride that made apologizing feel like pulling teeth. But he'd be proud too. Proud that we'd finally found our way back to each other. I pulled into my driveway to find Richard waiting up for me, sitting on the porch despite the chilly October night. How did it go? He asked as I climbed the steps. It went, I said, settling beside him. She's coming to stay with us for a while. Richard raised his eyebrows. That's a big step. It is, I agreed. But it's time. Past time, really. He pulled me close, and I rested my head on his shoulder. Tell me about it, he said, and I did. I told him everything about Linda's diagnosis, about Emma's garden, and about Marcus being caught in the middle and somehow bringing us back together. "He's a good kid," Richard said. "You raised him right." "We raised him right," I corrected. "And he deserves to have his whole family, not just the pieces we couldn't bear to lose." Later, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the evening, analyzing every word, every gesture, looking for signs that this fragile reconciliation might break. But underneath the worry was something else, something I hadn't felt in 12 years.
Hope.
Hashtag Chapter 4. The House of Healing. Linda checked out of the Marriott at 10 the next morning, her single suitcase evidence of how quickly she decided to come to Chicago. I met her in the lobby, and we drove through the city in my SUV, making awkward small talk about traffic and weather before lapsing into comfortable silence. The suburbs looked different in daylight, tree-lined streets with their October colors, kids riding bikes, neighbors walking dogs. Normal life, continuing obliviously while my world had completely shifted on its axis. "This is beautiful," Linda said as we pulled into my neighborhood. "Very different from Seattle." "More traditional," I agreed. Richard wanted city living, but I needed space after. I trailed off, but Linda understood. "After Emma," she finished gently. "After Emma," I confirmed. I couldn't stay in the apartment where we'd set up her nursery. We moved out here when Marcus was 10. We pulled into the driveway of my colonial-style house with its red door and neatly maintained garden. Richard's car was gone. He'd left early for a Saturday deposition, but his absence felt like a blessing. Linda and I needed time alone before family dinners and forced normalcy. "It's lovely, Claire," Linda said, studying the house. "Really lovely." I led her inside, suddenly seeing my home through her eyes. The family photos on the walls, the worn furniture that spoke of comfort over style, the little touches that made it ours. And conspicuously absent, any photos of Linda or Dad. She noticed immediately. "I don't blame you," she said quietly. "It probably hurt too much to look at them." "I have them," I admitted. "Boxed up in the attic." I couldn't throw them away, but I couldn't look at them either. "Could we look at them now? Together?" I considered saying no, claiming I needed more time, but Marcus's words from last night echoed in my head. "Actually do the work." So instead, I nodded and led Linda upstairs to the attic access in the hallway ceiling. I pulled down the folding ladder and climbed up, dust motes dancing in the shaft of morning light. The boxes were exactly where I'd left them 11 years ago, marked simply photos in faded marker. I brought down 3 of them, and we carried them to the living room, settling on the couch like we'd done 1,000 times as kids. Before we dive into these memories with Claire and Linda, I want to ask you to be part of our growing community. We're working hard to reach 1,000 subscribers, and every single one matters. If you're enjoying this story, please click that subscribe button now. It really helps us continue bringing you these heartfelt narratives. ****. The first box contained photos from our childhood, gap-toothed grins, bad haircuts, birthday parties in Mom's backyard before she passed away when I was 14. Linda laughed and cried looking at them, touching the images like she could reach through time. "Look at us," she said, holding up a photo of us in matching Easter dresses, probably 7 and 9 years old. We were so happy. We were, I agreed, before we knew how complicated life could get. The second box held photos from our adult years, Linda's college graduation, my wedding, Marcus as a baby. And there, near the bottom, were the photos from Dad's last year. Him looking healthy at first, then gradually thinner, more tired, the cancer stealing him piece by piece. "He was so proud of you both," Linda said, holding a photo of Dad at Marcus's 4th birthday party. "Even when he was sick, he'd talk about his girls and his grandson nonstop." "He wanted us to stay close," I said. "He made me promise at the end." "Me too," Linda admitted. "One of the last coherent conversations we had, he made me promise to take care of you. And then at his funeral, I broke that promise in the worst possible way. We sat with that truth between us, heavy but necessary. This was the work Marcus had talked about, not just forgiving, but acknowledging the harm done, the promises broken, the years lost. The third box was the hardest. It contained photos from Dad's funeral and the weeks before, images I never had the courage to look at again. But there was also an envelope, unmarked, that I'd forgotten was there. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were ultrasound photos of Emma. 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks. A tiny bean that became a baby with fingers and toes and a heartbeat. And underneath, a hospital bracelet from the day I'd miscarried, the day Emma had stopped being a pregnancy and become a memory. "Oh, Claire," Linda breathed, looking at the ultrasounds. She was real. She was so real. She was real, I echoed. And I never got to tell you. I never got to share the excitement or the fear or any of it because by the time I was ready to tell the family, Dad was sick and it didn't seem like the right time. And then he was gone, and you were gone, and Emma was gone, and I had nobody left except Richard and Marcus. "I'm here now," Linda said firmly. "And I want to hear everything. Tell me about her. Tell me about the pregnancy, about what you were planning, about all of it." So I did. For the next hour, I told Linda everything I'd been holding inside for 12 years. How I'd found out I was pregnant the week before Dad's diagnosis. How I'd struggled with morning sickness while researching experimental cancer treatments. How I'd felt Emma move for the first time 3 days before Dad died. How the stress of the funeral had caused cramping, bleeding, panic. How I'd lost her in a hospital bathroom, alone because Richard was home with Marcus and I couldn't bear to call anyone. Linda held my hand through all of it, crying with me, grieving for the niece she'd never known existed until yesterday. I had names picked out. I continued. Emma Claire if it was a girl, James Thomas if it was a boy, after Mom and Dad. I had a whole nursery planned. Marcus was going to help decorate. And then, I couldn't finish the sentence. And then it all fell apart, Linda finished gently. Everything fell apart, I agreed. My dad, my baby, my sister. In 1 month, I lost everything that mattered except Marcus and Richard. And I was so angry, at God, at fate, at you, at myself. I was drowning in anger and grief, and I didn't know how to swim. How did you survive it? I thought about those dark months after Emma. Therapy. A lot of therapy. And Richard, who refused to let me give up. And Marcus, who needed me to be functional even when I wanted to fall apart. I just kept going, one day at a time like we said last night. Some days the only victory was getting out of bed. But I did it. I should have been there, Linda said. Not for the first time. You should have, I agreed. But you weren't, and we can't change that. We can only decide what happens now. We spent the rest of the morning going through photos, telling stories, filling in the gaps of 12 lost years. Linda told me about her relationships, 2 serious boyfriends, both of whom she'd pushed away when things got too real. I told her about Marcus's journey to becoming a pilot, about the anxiety attacks he'd had after his father died, about how flying had saved him the same way it had saved my late husband. Around noon, Richard came home with lunch, sandwiches from the deli where Linda and I used to eat as teenagers. He'd remembered, or I'd told him at some point, and the gesture made Linda tear up again. "Thank you for letting me invade your home," Linda said to Richard as we ate at the kitchen table. "Your family," Richard said simply. "You're always welcome here." "Even after everything I did to Claire?" "Especially after everything," Richard replied. "Because you came back. You could have stayed in Seattle, could have lived with the regret, but you came back. That takes courage." After lunch, Linda excused herself to take a nap. The MS made her tired easily, and Richard pulled me aside in the kitchen. "How are you really doing with this?" he asked. I considered lying, claiming everything was fine, but this was Richard. He'd seen me at my worst and loved me anyway. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "Terrified she'll leave again. Terrified we'll fall back into old patterns. Terrified that 12 years is too big a gap to bridge. And I'm hopeful," I added, which is almost scarier than the fear. Because hope means I'm vulnerable again. It means I could get hurt. Richard pulled me into a hug. "You could also heal," he pointed out. "You could get your sister back. Marcus could have his aunt. That's worth the risk." "Is it?" You tell me. Is it? I thought about Emma's garden in Portland, about the plaque Linda had placed there in memory of a niece she'd never met. I thought about Marcus's face last night when we'd all hugged together. I thought about the photos we'd looked through this morning, remembering who we'd been before grief had twisted us into strangers. Yes, I said finally. It's worth the risk. That evening, Marcus came over for dinner. I made Dad's favorite, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, a recipe that had been passed down through 3 generations of Thompson women. Linda helped in the kitchen, and for a moment it felt like old times. 2 sisters cooking together, talking and laughing, moving around each other with the practiced ease of people who'd once known each other's rhythms perfectly. You remember the time Dad tried to make this himself and use salt instead of sugar in the rub? Linda asked, laughing at the memory. We choked it down anyway because we didn't want to hurt his feelings, I added, grinning. He knew, though. He said, "Girls, you're terrible liars, but I love you anyway." We laughed together, and it felt like healing. Like maybe we could find our way back to being sisters instead of strangers. Dinner was surprisingly comfortable. Marcus regaled us with stories from his flights. The passengers who tried to smuggle impossible items onto planes, the storms he'd flown through, the proposals he'd witnessed at 30,000 feet. Linda talked about her architectural projects, and Richard shared tales from his law practice. It was normal and mundane and absolutely wonderful. After dinner, we moved to the living room. Linda seemed tired but happy, curled up in the armchair that had been Richard's mother's. Marcus sat on the floor by the coffee table like he had as a kid. Richard and I share the couch. "I want to propose something," Linda said during a lull in conversation. "Something that might be too much too fast, but I'm going to say it anyway." We all turned to her expectantly. "I want to go to Emma's grave," Linda said.
Together.
All of us. I want to meet my niece, even if it's 12 years too late. I felt my chest tighten. I hadn't been to Emma's grave in years. Couldn't bear to go. Couldn't face that tiny headstone with its inscription, "Emma Claire Thompson, forever in our hearts." But Linda was right. If we were going to truly heal, we needed to do this together. "When?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Tomorrow," Linda said. "If you're ready. If not, we can wait." "No," I said quickly, before I could talk myself out of it. "Tomorrow. We should do it tomorrow." Marcus reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'll come too. If you want me there." "I want you there," I confirmed. "I want all of us there. Emma should know her family even now." The rest of the evening was quieter, more reflective. We turned in early, Linda to the guest room, Marcus to his apartment, Richard and me to our bedroom. As I lay in bed that night, I felt the weight of tomorrow pressing down on me. Going to Emma's grave after all these years felt insurmountable, but doing it with Linda, with Marcus, with Richard, maybe that would make it bearable. "Are you sure about this?" Richard asked in the darkness. "No," I admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." "That's my girl," he murmured, pulling me close. I dreamed that night of Emma. Not the ultrasound images I'd looked at for years, but a real little girl with my green eyes and Richard's dimples, running through a garden full of sunlight and flowers. Linda was there too, swinging Emma in circles while Marcus pushed them higher. Dad stood nearby, watching with pride. And Mom, gone since I was 14, smiled at all of us. In the dream, Emma turned to me and said, "It's okay, Mama. You can let me go now." I woke with tears streaming down my face, but for the first time in 12 years, they didn't feel like drowning. They felt like release. Chapter 5. The Garden of Remembrance. The cemetery was quiet on Sunday morning, with just a few other visitors scattered among the headstones. Oak Grove Memorial Park sprawled across 50 acres of rolling hills on Chicago's north side, a place I'd chosen because it felt peaceful, because the trees reminded me of the park where I'd played as a child. I hadn't been back since Emma's burial 12 years ago. Richard drove, with me in the passenger seat and Linda and Marcus in the back. None of us spoke much during the 20-minute drive. What was there to say? We were visiting a grave for a child none of us had known except me, honoring a loss that had shaped all our lives in different ways. The cemetery gates were open, the grounds immaculately maintained. Richard navigated the winding paths from memory. He came here sometimes, I knew, though he never told me about it. Tending Emma's grave when I couldn't. The thought made my eyes burn with gratitude and grief in equal measure. We parked near the children's section, a part of the cemetery I'd insisted on despite the funeral director's gentle attempts to steer me elsewhere. They should be with other children, I'd said through tears. She should be with friends. Marcus got out first and offered his hand to help me from the car. My legs felt weak, unsteady. Linda stayed close to my other side, and together we walked up a small hill toward a row of tiny headstones, each one a story of loss and love that had no proper ending. Emma Stone was the fourth from the left. A small pink granite marker with a carved angel and the inscription, Emma Claire Thompson, beloved daughter and sister, forever in our hearts, with the single date of her loss. No birth, no death, just a moment when possibility became memory. Someone, Richard, I realized with a fresh wave of emotion, had left fresh flowers. Yellow roses, my favorite. The grass around the stone was trimmed neatly, free of fallen leaves. Oh, Linda breathed beside me, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh, Emma. We stood there in a semicircle, Richard, Linda, Marcus, and me, staring at this small piece of granite that represented so much pain and love. Birds sang in the nearby oak trees. A breeze rustled through the autumn leaves. Life continued, oblivious and beautiful and cruel in its indifference. I don't know what to say, I admitted, breaking the silence. I haven't been here in so long, and now that I'm here, I don't know what to say to her. Say what's in your heart, Linda suggested gently. That's all anyone can do. I want to pause here for just a moment to ask something of you. If this story is touching your heart, if you're feeling the weight of this family's journey, please consider subscribing to our channel. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. Click that subscribe button and be part of this community. Asterisk, asterisk. I knelt down, my knees pressing into the damp grass, and placed my hand on the cold stone. Hi, baby girl, I whispered. I'm sorry it took me so long to come back. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to visit you before now. Marcus knelt beside me, his pilot's uniform traded for jeans and a sweater. Hey, Emma. I'm your big brother, Marcus. I wanted to teach you so many things. I wanted to show you how to catch fireflies and build forts and ride a bike. His voice cracked. I wanted to protect you and annoy you and be the best big brother in the world. Linda knelt on my other side. Emma, I'm your Aunt Linda. I never got to meet you, but I've thought about you every day since I learned you existed. I built a garden for you in Portland, with flowers and sunlight, because I wanted you to have something beautiful in the world, even though you're not here to see it. Richard placed his hand on my shoulder, but didn't kneel. I've been taking care of your space, sweetheart. Making sure you have flowers, keeping your stone clean. Your mother loves you so much. We all do. We always will. The tears came then for all of us. We cried for Emma, for the life she never got to live, for the moments we'd never share, for the hole she'd left that could never be filled. But we also cried for each other, for the years Linda and I had lost, for the family Marcus had been denied, for the grief we'd all carried alone instead of together. I need to tell you something, Emma, I said, my voice steadier now. For 12 years, I've been carrying guilt about losing you. I thought it was my fault, that the stress of losing Grandpa and fighting with Aunt Linda caused the miss.